too low. Most places holding up in double figures. So a fine start to the day tomorrow, and not an especially fresh one either. But not everywhere is going to get off to a fine start. Still some showers across western parts of Scotland continuing through the night and into the morning. Further east, a drier, brighter picture here. Across much of Northern Ireland starting to turn cloudier before that rain pushes its way in later on. And then across much of England and Wales, yes, a few showers for western areas. Central and eastern parts getting the day off to a bright, often sunny start. Then as we go through the day, the big talking point is a band of rain that's sweeping its way in from the west. It's going to gradually make its way in, and the rain is going to be pretty heavy on it. And with the heavy rain, watch out as there could be some strong winds. We're talking coastal gales in places, particularly towards the west and southwest. Obviously, under the wind and rain, it's going to feel pretty unpleasant at times. Further east, temperatures still just about getting into the low 20s, but later on, that wet and windy weather is going to push through, so a wet end to the day across many eastern parts tomorrow, turning drier, brighter towards the west. The unsettled theme continues through the rest of the weekend and into the beginning of next week, with some showers or longer spells of rain for many of us. Bye-bye.
Today, clouds overhead. Total zen within. Boxed Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good evening. This is the latest AI travel news from GBNews.com. Motorists should exercise caution on the A92 southbound near Chapel Junction due to a vehicle breakdown causing congestion. The A1M southbound in Cambridgeshire has multiple lane closures, while in Leicestershire, expect 50-minute delays on the M1 northbound between junctions 20 and 22. In South Gloucestershire, traffic on the M5 northbound is slow moving, and in East Sussex, the A259 westbound faces half-hour delays due to roadwork. And on the trains, there are disruptions on the Elizabeth line between Romford and Shenfield. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Miriam, you can't be serious. Scrapping the triple lock on state pensions? Madness.
Andrew, we just can't carry on pretending. The numbers just don't add up. We've got to be honest with people. We've got to face the facts. That's what people want.
Well, that's what you get on GB News and on Britain's Newsroom. Lively debates, lively conversation.
Britain deserves a newsroom that puts the facts and your voice first, and we're not afraid to hold power to account.
And each other. So join me, Andrew Pearce.
And me, Miriam Gates, for Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's News Channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up? About 10.
So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's News Channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Britain was once the envy of the world. But look around. A nation that no longer knows what it is or where it's going. A country that's broken. How do we fix Britain? How do we bring it back? Friday night with Matt Goodwin at 8 p.m. only on GB News.
Kates, and you're watching GB News. Coming up in the next hour. Well, breaking news this afternoon. The Home Office wins its legal fight to continue to house asylum seekers in the Bell Hotel in Epping. Government lawyers argued that using hotels to accommodate illegal migrants was in the national interest. We'll be crossing live to Epping to get local reaction. And finally, And as the autumn budget looms, rumours of tax rises and debt crises abound. Will the Chancellor be forced to raise taxes in order to balance Britain's books? Or is there another way to shrink that black hole? The government has announced that British children are to be vaccinated against chickenpox. But as vaccination rates fall dramatically, are we doing enough to restore parents' faith in childhood jabs? And ahead of the World Championships next month, World Athletics has begun testing women athletes using cheek swabs and blood samples to check that they're female. Is this a necessary safeguard or an unwelcome intrusion? And joining me tonight to debate all these topics, I've got the head of political economy at Onward UK, Gavin Rice, and GB News' senior political commentator, Nigel Nelson. But first of all, your latest news headlines.
Miriam, thank you very much. The top stories: a temporary injunction that was set to block asylum seekers from being housed at an Essex hotel has been overturned at the Court of Appeal. Samani Hotels, which owns the Bell Hotel in Epping, and the Home Office challenged a High Court ruling that would have stopped 138 asylum seekers from being housed there beyond September the 12th. In a ruling last week, Mr Justice Eyre granted Epping Forest District Council an interim injunction after the authority claimed that Samani Hotels had breached planning rules by using the Bell as accommodation for asylum seekers. After a hearing yesterday, 3 Court of Appeal judges ruled in favour of Samani Hotels and the Home Office today, stating that Mr Justice Eyre's ruling was seriously flawed in principle. The ruling will come as a relief to the Home Office, which had been braced for further legal challenges from other councils over the use of hotels in their areas. Kemi Badenoch claimed Sir Keir Starmer puts the rights of illegal immigrants above the rights of British people who just want to feel safe in their towns and communities. Reform UK leader Nigel Farage says the government has used the ECHR against the people of Epping. He says illegal migrants have more rights than the British people under Starmer. A councillor for Epping said the government needs to take responsibility for the trauma and disruption in the Essex town over recent weeks.
Well, Epping Forest has brought the wider asylum seeker debate into sharp national focus. The concern and motivation of Epping Forest District Council throughout has been the well-being of our local residents. Where we had clarity and resolution, we now have doubt and confusion. However, this is not the end of the matter. While the Court of Appeal has lifted the temporary injunction, the case for the final junction is still to be heard. Our battle on behalf of our residents will continue. A few weeks from now, we will be back in court, where we trust the strength of our case will still prevail.
Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp says it shows the current government has lost control of the country's borders.
9 months before the election, the last government closed down 200 asylum hotels. Had that rate of closure continued, right now there wouldn't be any asylum hotels at all. And in fact, the last Conservative government closed down this very hotel before the last election. The reason the Labour government are still using hotels is because they have lost control of our borders. They cancelled the Rwanda deterrent just before it started. As a result, the numbers crossing the channel have been the worst ever, and that is why this government has so many hotels costing hard-working taxpayers billions. It's because they've lost control of our borders.
Border Security and Asylum Minister Dame Angela Eagle said the Home Office launched this appeal so hotels could be exited in a controlled and orderly way. Elsewhere, Angela Rayner has reportedly saved £40,000 in stamp duty on her new seaside flat after telling tax authorities it was her main home. The Telegraph newspaper says the Deputy Prime Minister is understood to have removed her name from the deeds of her house in Greater Manchester after a few weeks before buying an £800,000 seaside flat in Hove. These changes would enable Ms Rayner to avoid paying £70,000 in stamp duty, which would have been applicable if Hove was her second home instead. She reportedly is thought to have paid £30,000 in stamp duty. But a spokesperson for Ms Rayner said she paid the correct duty owed on the purchase entirely properly and in line with all relevant requirements. They say any suggestion otherwise is entirely without basis. A major police operation is underway to find a British toddler who's believed to have been abducted by his Russian mum. 3-year-old Oliver P's dad sounded the alarm by reporting him missing to the police in Costa del Sol in Spain. He was last seen on July the 4th, according to Spanish authorities. The search for the little boy and his mum was ongoing last night as detectives confirmed they were treating the case as parental abduction. It's not immediately clear if a court has issued an international arrest warrant for the unnamed mum. It's also unclear what the child's custody situation is. And finally, all young children in England and Wales will be offered a free chickenpox vaccine on the NHS from January of next year. It'll be given as 2 doses at 12 and 18 months of age, combined with the existing MMR jab, which protects against measles, mumps and rubella. A secondary catch-up campaign is planned for slightly older children, so they don't miss out. And those are the latest headlines for now. More from me in an hour.
Tune into GB News Radio wherever you are, online, on DAB digital radio, on TuneIn, on Radio Player and on your smart speaker. Just say, play GB News.
Welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Miriam Cates, and joining me until 7 o'clock, I've got my panel here in the studio. I've got the head of political economy at Onward, Gavin Rice, and GB News' senior political commentator, Nigel Nelson. And of course, we want to hear from you, so please do get your views in at gbnews.com/your-say. Well, big breaking news today. Asylum seekers will be allowed to stay at an Epping migrant hotel until a full trial could be heard, a senior court has said in a bombshell ruling. This afternoon, the Court of Appeal has overturned a temporary injunction brought by Epping Forest Council that would have forced the closure of the Bell Hotel in Essex, which is currently housing 138 asylum seekers. Take a listen.
Therefore, we grant permission to appeal both to Somani and to the Home Secretary against the grant of the interim injunction. We allow the appeals and we set aside the injunction imposed on 19 August 2025.
Now, the ruling gave the Home Office and the Bell Hotel owners, Somani Hotels, permission to appeal the injunction in a move that's likely to spark anger among local residents who have been protesting against the use of the Bell Hotel for illegal migrants. Well, we can now speak with GB News national reporter Jack Carson, who is live on the scene in Epping. Jack, big news today. How have local people responded to this court ruling?
Well, to put it in a couple of words, of those pink ladies which have become infamous at some of the protests here outside the hotel in the last few weeks, one of them put it to me that she was devastated, another put it to me that she was disgusted at the decision and the ruling handed down by the Court of Appeal today. They said in that summary as they handed down that ruling that Justice Ayres' initial decision to allow a temporary injunction was seriously flawed in principle. They said, we conclude that the judge made a number of errors in principle which undermine this decision, and they continue that the judge's approach to ignore the obvious consequence that the closure of one site means capacity needs to be identified elsewhere in the system was one of the factors that they considered to overturn the initial temporary injunction. That would have meant that the 138 asylum seekers which are housed here would have had to be moved no later than September the 12th. We know that there is a full hearing, a trial if you like, to take place in October to hear the full case as to whether permanently asylum seekers are able to be housed here at the Bell Hotel in Epping, and that has given some local councillors here, they say, something to fight for. This very much for them seeming only a bump in the road in the longer term for them ambition to ensure that asylum seekers are not housed here at the Bell Hotel. If we just spin the camera around a little bit, you can see just a small protest that's taking place here currently. As you probably have heard in the background, there's been a lot of beeping of horns as well, showing support for these small protests that's taken place. Man there holding a Union flag, one holding a St George's flag. As I mentioned, there's some of those pink ladies who have become quite infamous here protesting as well. There is a real sense in this community that they are not happy with this decision at all. But in terms of what the Home Office say in reaction, the Home Office Minister Dame Angela Eagle said that the government was committed to closing asylum hotels by the end of this Parliament, but added that it appealed against the High Court ruling in the first place because the hotel, at the end of using those hotels had to be done in what they called a controlled and orderly way. But Epping Forest District Council say that it is ruling nothing out following that Court of Appeal decision, and as they rule nothing out, protests here in Epping continue.
Jack Carson, national reporter, and we'll be returning to you towards the end of the show, but thank you very much for that report. Now, panel, lots to unpack here in this ruling, but I suppose the headline is that the Home Office, the government, despite saying that they're going to close hotels, has now won a legal case to keep one open. This is not a political victory for the Home Secretary, is it, Gavin?
No, absolutely not. I mean, I think clearly there's a bit more to this case than meets the eye. This is only an interim decision about the current temporary injunction pending a final planning decision about whether the hotel will remain open or close further down the line. The thing I find interesting, though, is why should it be the case that the default is that the hotel is open with migrants staying in it rather than being closed? I know there was the question of whether the Home Secretary should have a say in it. I mean, it seems pretty sensible to me that they should, because they're responsible for the overall asylum system, and also a question of whether the original judge in granting the injunction was giving in to political pressure from protests. And I understand all of that, but what I don't understand is why the default is that it's open pending the final decision.
Especially as, Nigel, this wasn't a kind of arbitrary protest just at the principle of having asylum seekers in the hotels. It was sparked by accusations of a sexual assault on a schoolgirl and local people feeling unsafe. As Gavin said, surely the default decision should be to remove the asylum seekers until it can be made safe.
Well, I mean, on the basis that you've got to house them somewhere, the focus is on this particular hotel, but the principle of keeping them in hotels at least has got to be preserved until they can be closed in an orderly fashion, which the government promises to do by 2029. When it comes to the allegations about people who are in the hotel, that's being dealt with by the police and through the courts, so that's the proper process, in the same way that this was dealt with by the courts, which was again the proper process. And the idea, which I think was really important that the judge made today, was that protests shouldn't influence legal decisions, because if they do, you just create more protests.
But the original case was brought by Epping Forest Council on a planning technicality, and I suppose what I don't understand is why the judges today, the appeal court judges, were not only considering that planning technicality, they were also looking at the Home Office's arguments under the ECHR, for example.
Right, so my lawyer friends are telling me that the ECHR, the European Convention on Human Rights, has nothing to do with this, and this is purely a technical decision on planning, as you say. However, on the subject of the Home Secretary's involvement, and I quote, if this is the judge, the Secretary of State's statutory duty is a manifestation of the United Kingdom's obligations under Article 3 ECHR, which establishes non-derogable fundamental human rights. So the fact that the Home Secretary is dealing with this asylum crisis at all in the first place arises from our membership of the ECHR and the legal obligations that flow from that. So, OK, maybe there's a technical argument, but the reason we're in this situation in the first place is because of our ECHR membership.
And, of course, the root cause of this is the record numbers of migrants crossing the boat on the Channel. Sir Keir Starmer, like the previous government, has completely failed to stop the boats. And in a way, I can feel for the Home Secretary, because she does have this legal duty. What's she supposed to do about it?
Well, exactly. I mean, on one hand, the judgment gives her a sigh of relief. On the other, she must be bracing herself for the political storm which is about to break over her, having done it. What it comes down to is, what would you have done with these people had they been suddenly evicted from that hotel? That caused a real problem. As Gavin just said, that there is a statutory duty to not let them go on the streets and be destitute. And if they were, the idea that crime would become less, I think probably it would become more if that happened. So it puts everyone in a really difficult position.
Well, I think a lot of people think that actually they should be detained. Now, I know that under the ECHR that's not possible, but if we were free...
Well, it's under our own laws it's not possible.
Well, the fact, OK, the ECHR is embedded in the human rights. Well, we can't detain people unless there's a high chance of being deported, and we know at the moment there's not a high chance of being deported.
Okay.
But in theory, would you support keeping asylum seekers until a decision's made, until the full checks have been made. Would you support detention?
Well, it depends how you do it.
No, Nigel.
Well, it's not a yes or no, because, I mean, Nigel Farage talks about putting them in detention camps where there's no escape. That means building Category B prisons. It's just ridiculous. So these people are not criminals, therefore you can't detain them. That's under British law. They can come and go. I do think that we need an alternative to hotels, whether one of Labour's ideas is unused warehouses, it may be military bases. Things like that I think should be explored.
Doesn't coming here illegally make you a criminal?
Well, yes, of course it does. I mean, so the whole issue is that we don't know what the status of the people coming here is. Are they a legitimate refugee or are they not? We don't have the capacity to process those applications at the speed that would be necessary to establish who has the right to be here quickly and to deport those who don't have a right to be here equally quickly. But you get into a loop situation here where the reason that we can't detain people is because the probability of their deportation is low. The reason that probability is low is because there's too many people coming into the system. The reason so many people are coming here is because they know that, and they know that therefore they'll be housed in a hotel rather than detained pending a swift deportation. So it's an overused term, but it's becoming a doom loop.
Exactly, and unless we can establish some sort of deterrent, it's going to stay the same.
Or just leave the ECHR.
Well, exactly, which would allow us to establish a deterrent. Nigel, I want to dig into some of the arguments about why people are concerned about having asylum seekers in their communities. And I think sometimes, and the argument from the left is that people, women in particular, are irrational to fear crimes, particularly sex crimes, from asylum seekers. But I suppose, as a woman, I would say that fear is a very highly evolved instinct to not trust people you don't know, especially from men whose cultures you don't know. It's a perfectly natural and understandable human fear, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, this is the other problem. Nobody wants asylum seekers on their doorstep. It's as simple as that. And even if you find a different way of doing it, once you actually get them out of hotels, supposing you put them on a military base or an ex-military base, we've seen what happens there, that local people object. So instead of talking about 138 people at the Bell Hotel, you might be talking about several thousand. So the objections would keep coming. I mean, I don't think it's either irrational or not understandable that people object to it. The point is that nobody, not Reform, not the Tories, not Labour so far, but they've got a manager, have come up with an answer of how to actually deal with it.
And Gavin, just really briefly, I mean, we can talk about the legal arguments and the technicalities, but underlying this is just a sense of deep unfairness that people who have played by the rules are getting worse treatment than people who have broken the rules, come here illegally, and then get all these luxuries.
Absolutely, and people just know from looking at the footage, and indeed from data, that most of the people arriving here on boats are physically fit, men of working age. They're on balance, not women, they're not children. It's clearly something else is going on.
And they're coming from France, which is where I went on holiday, and I can tell you, it is a safe country. Well, thank you very much. Coming up, more than £8 billion has been wiped off our major banks, triggered by Rachel Reeves' tax crusade. What will she tax next? We'll be discussing that next.
This is our country, and we think it's amazing. From high tea to the high street, we love it all. Even the rain, we like that too. There's nowhere else we'd rather be. That's why we're here to be the fearless champion of Britain, its voices and its values. Because we are GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
So he can say whatever he wants.
A straight-talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I ever got up? About 10.
So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christys Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions. But every Friday night at 9 p.m, you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christys Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to GB News. I'm Miriam Cates, and keeping me company until 7 o'clock, I've got the head of political economy at Onward UK, Gavin Rice, and GB News' senior political commentator, Nigel Nelson. Well, there are growing fears that the Chancellor will inflict damaging tax rises in the upcoming autumn budget as she continues her attempts to try and balance the books. Earlier this week, reports circulated that one option being considered by the Chancellor to raise revenue is applying national insurance to rental payments on rental homes. Yesterday, the chairman of major supermarket chain Asda warned Rachel Reeves that if she wanted to grow the economy, she should move away from taxing everything in some way, shape or form. And today, more than £8 billion has been wiped off the value of Britain's biggest banks amid fears that Rachel Reeves is preparing to launch a tax raid on the banking sector. And as this chart shows, for the last 25 years, Britain's budget has been running at a deficit, with successive governments spending more each year than the Treasury has received in tax revenue. Economists are warning of a looming debt crisis as the cost of Britain's borrowing soars, and speculation grows that the UK may once again need a bailout from the IMF. So, Nigel, anyone who ran a household on that basis, 25 years of spending more than you earned, would be bankrupt.
Yes, but fortunately that the country isn't run like a household. And you're right that the borrowing is too high. I think Rachel Reeves knows that. I think it's absolute bunkum that we'd have to go to the IMF. The conditions are very different today from 1976. But what they're doing is we are being primed up for tax rises. She is going to have to raise taxes in the November budget. And what they seem to be doing is throwing out all these different ideas, trying to find out which is least worst. There's no best option. No one likes tax rises, but you're looking for the least worst one. I quite like yesterday's one about charging national insurance on landlords. That seemed to be a more sensible tax than some of the others.
Just push up rent.
Yes, I mean, the trouble is everything you do with a tax rise is going to change behaviour and cause a problem.
Well, there is an alternative, is to put 1 or 2p on the basic rate of income tax. Nobody likes that, of course, but it's fair and you can't avoid it.
And I would rather see that. I would rather see that. And I wish that Rachel Reeves hadn't ruled that out in the manifesto. I think she should have left herself the leeway to use income tax. These are the big taxes, income tax and VAT. She didn't. As a result, she has to hit specific groups of people who inevitably squeal about it because they feel it's unfair.
Well, I think it is unfair with the top 1%.
But however,
28%.
it is a manifesto commitment, and I'm sure that the moment that she broke that, you'd be leaping on her too.
Well, I personally wouldn't, because I think it's a daft commitment. But anyway, but Gavin, are tax rises actually necessary, or would cuts be better?
Well, I mean, clearly the British state is too big, but the problem is that every single time that Reeves raised taxes, what seems to happen is that receipts actually fall because of the growth-killing effect that it has, or the cost of borrowing simply jumps up. So the 30-year UK gilt yield spiked last week, for example, and that's a really worrying trend that we're all watching. I think basically there's a couple of things going on. The first thing is that Reeves politically, with her own backbenchers, cannot get any meaningful cuts through. They couldn't get through welfare reform. They couldn't get through means testing of the winter fuel allowance, which I think is a reasonable cut. The second thing is that essentially both Labour and Conservatives have tried to protect working people as much as possible, average and below average, from the impacts of our rising spending liabilities as a country without making any cuts. And as you say, arguably, I'm not going to make any friends here, the basic rate of income tax for a country like the UK isn't high enough.
No. Yeah, well, you say that. I mean, it's not as high as in France, for example. And back in 1980, the basic rate of tax was 30%. Actually, people on medium and lower incomes are paying way less tax than they were in the 1980s. But we've redistributed very well, haven't we?
Well, this is the problem, and that's my point about it was unfortunate that they decided, I think they won the election without that promise, by the way, that they decided to be absolutely certain of winning the election is to make a promise on the big taxes, and that causes a real problem. I mean, she is also, bear in mind, cutting an awful lot as well. 10,000 civil servants are going to go, Department of Transport losing 15 billion, DEFRA's budget is going down, then she's got big expenditure coming up. We've got a load of money to find for defence now.
But those are small fry compared to the ratchet effect of benefits and pensions that we're going to see over the next decade or two.
Right. Well, you know, the welfare bill has become far too high. There's too many people on working age welfare and out of work and so on. But the elephant in the room is the sheer size of the state pension, which is going up and up and up. The cost of the triple lock is due to cost us another £15.5 billion per year by 2030, adding to the £138 billion per year that it already costs. It is extraordinarily expensive. And there are only 2 working people for every 1 pensioner in the UK, and that ratio is only going to continue to get worse and worse and worse. So unless we can do something about our demographic conditions, and as you'll have seen, our birth rate has plunged to its lowest ever again this month, then we're never going to be able to turn the tax spending situation around.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to talk about the actual numbers here, because I get a lot of stick for talking about the state pension being too big. And it's not that I don't want pensioners to get pensions, but the maths of it, 2 people on average wage pay about £9,000 between them a year in tax. The average 80-year-old has about £20,000 of money spent on them in health and pensions. I mean, it just doesn't add up. You cannot run this system when you've only got 2 or 3 working-age people per pensioner.
No, I mean, the problem we've got is an ageing population. It's a problem for social care, problem for the NHS, and it's a problem for pensions. I agree with Gavin. I think that the triple lock has had its day. No political party at the moment seems prepared to grasp the nettle and get rid of it. But the element I would remove from it is the automatic 2% rise that pensioners get if nothing else goes up. I think it's right to keep it in line with earnings and prices, but that automatic rise has distorted the pension over the years.
Well, it was created in an era in which inflation was 2.5% or below. I mean, it's understandable that pensioners think that they, you know, have a right to a decent living. But at the end of the day, if their pension is going up higher than the rate at which wages are going up, that is a distribution from working people to retired people. And as we know, the state pension is paid out of current taxes. It's not something that people paid into. It doesn't work like that.
Isn't the problem that successive governments and politicians have just kicked the can down the road? Lots of people are blaming Rachel Reeves for this current crisis. She certainly hasn't helped. But actually, the debt crisis is decades old, or has been decades in the making.
Well, it has, yes. I mean, that's what politicians do. They do, if they can kick a can down the road, they give it a really hefty boot. And so, yes, there's debt with one problem. As we're on pensions, we never actually grasped the nettle when we should have done. What we should have done sort of 50-odd years ago, when we knew what was going to happen, we had the data to say the population was going to age, that's when we should have started to raise the retirement age, but very gradually. So it didn't click in immediately with an extra year rise. You could have done it on a month-by-month basis based on birthday. But even industry didn't do it. That they kept final salary pension schemes going, and then suddenly they had to pull the ball because they couldn't afford them anymore. So nobody prepared for the future, which they should have done. And it does date back 50 years ago.
Would raising the state pension age help?
I think it would need to be done progressively, but we also need to make sure that we get more people into work, and we also need to make sure that the birth rate goes up. We just need to fix those demographic trends. But I totally agree.
Don't know how you can do that one.
I think it has had its day.
I think there's some evidence as well that the more you put up the pension age, the more people just become unwell before that age and end up claiming working age health benefits, and therefore it doesn't save all that money.
But you need to change employment law on that basis. So
the
you're not...
incentives are all wrong at the moment, aren't they?
Yeah, they are.
Across the whole
Yes,
system. But
yes.
what government will be brave enough to sort them out? We shall see. Well, coming up, the NHS is going to roll out a free chickenpox vaccine for all young children in England and Wales. But how many parents will choose it? That's after the break.
Ready to soak up that holiday sunshine?
Won't we need some cover?
No worries. All sorted.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
Loads of sunshine and offer across the eastern Mediterranean. A few heavy showers in southern Italy and across Croatia. And the same weather system bringing the UK some wet weather on Saturday will also bring some rain to northernmost parts of Spain and Portugal. But most of Iberia dry, fine and sunny. Heavy showers in central and southern Italy and pretty wet in Croatia as well. Further heavy showers to come in Dubrovnik on Sunday. They should be clearing by Monday. Sunny skies in Barcelona.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
Hello, very good evening to you. I'm here from the Met Office with your GB News weather update. Through tonight, it is going to turn mostly dry for many of us, but then tomorrow there's a band of heavy rain with some strong winds mixed in with it, all due to a weather system currently out in the Atlantic, but it is heading our way. Nonetheless, before that, most of today's showers are going to be fizzling out through the next few hours. Still some continuing for some western areas in particular. Many places, though, having a dry and often clear night, and under those clear skies, some rural spots in the countryside, it could turn a bit fresh. Temperatures in a few places could dip into mid, maybe high single figures, but most towns and cities, the more built up areas, holding up in double digits. A fine start to the day for many of us then tomorrow. Lots of actual sunshine around through the morning across much of England and Wales, away from those western coastal parts where there will be a few showers. It's looking largely dry, lots of blue sky through the morning. But across Northern Ireland, starting to turn cloudier by around 7, 8 o'clock in the morning, and a few patches of cloud and a few showers across parts of Scotland. Towards the east, though, it is looking largely dry. Away from Shetland here, there will be some fairly heavy rain around. Then as we go through the day, that band of rain that I highlighted at the start, that's going to sweep its way in, and so things are going to turn wet and windy as it pushes through. It's going to take a little while to arrive across eastern parts, not really until the evening or even overnight, but when you get that rain, it is going to be quite heavy and, like I said, some very strong winds mixed in with it. Because of the blustery wet weather coming through, it's going to feel fresher than of late, but warm enough in any sunny breaks ahead of it arriving. On Sunday, and we have more showers coming in across western parts. Further east, it's likely to stay dry with some decent sunshine, but even a few showers are likely to push through later on in the day. And then the showery, often unsettled theme continues as we go into next week. Some more persistent rain is possible at times as well. I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good evening. This is the latest AI travel news from GBNews.com. A road incident on the A96 near Pit Capel restricts both directions, causing delays. An accident on the A1M southbound between junctions 17 and 16 also causes delays. Stockport's M56 eastbound is congested between junctions 3 and 1 with a 20-minute delay. Gloucestershire's M5 northbound faces 1.5-hour delays between junctions 20 and 17. In East Sussex, a collision on the A27 westbound near A22 Polegate East causes lane closures and a 10-minute delay. And on the trains, the Elizabeth Line services are disrupted between Romford and Shenfield. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Miriam Cates, and keeping me company until 7 o'clock. I've got my panel, the head of political economy at Onward UK, Gavin Rice, and GB News' senior political commentator, Nigel Nelson. And you've been getting in touch with your views on gbnews.com/your say. Lots of really interesting comments saying that the biggest problem is not just the state pension, Francis Moore said, it's also the unfunded public sector defined benefits pensions. Other people have said the same. That is also an enormous liability. Lots and lots of public sector pensions coming down the line that needs to be paid for. So, very good points. Very big discussion coming up. We have to see what happens in the budget. Well, moving on to our next topic. All young children in England and Wales are going to be offered a free chickenpox vaccine by the NHS from January next year. It's going to be given as 2 doses at 12 and 18 months of age, combined with the existing MMR jab, which protects against measles, mumps and rubella. Now, the chickenpox vaccine has been given routinely for decades in many other countries like Australia and Canada, but British parents who wanted to protect their children against chickenpox have previously had to pay up to £200 to have the jab privately. So today's announcement comes against a backdrop of declining rates of childhood vaccine take-up, which is a trend that has caused a really concerning rise in previously rare diseases such as measles. So will enough parents choose to give their children the chickenpox jab? Gavin, I personally think this is a really good development. Chickenpox is rarely dangerous, but it's pretty unpleasant. I don't see why children shouldn't have it. But are you concerned that we'll have continue the current trend of vaccine rates just dropping off?
Well, so in general, I think vaccines are fantastic, and I think it's unfortunate that the debate about vaccines in general got politicised in a negative way because of COVID. Vaccines mean that people, humans and adult humans and children, do not need to die needlessly of diseases which used to slaughter us in the past, and science has basically meant that we've been able to overcome this. But it's really concerning that rates have been going down. We need 95% vaccination for herd immunity for MMR diseases, for example, but in some London boroughs it's fallen down to as low as 65%, and it's even lower, that's an average, it's even lower in some particular communities. So we need to look at the reason that that is happening, because that affects the entire country if you get vaccine escape.
Yeah, and it's really interesting to look at the link with ethnicity, Nigel, because Asians and white British parents still have very high, it is falling, but still high take-ups, over the 90%. But Black, African and Caribbean has dropped enormously, down to the kind of 60, even 58% levels in some part. Why do you think it is that some communities just aren't taking up vaccines?
I tend to agree with Gavin again on this one, that actually COVID had a lot to do with it. I think that a lot of the information put out, or the misinformation put out about vaccines over COVID, made people fear all vaccines. So if you take the overall average, 1 in 6 children are now missing out on their MMR vaccines, or their second dose of MMR. Now, I can understand that we go back to Andrew Wakefield, and I remember writing stories about that.
So he linked the MMR
with autism,
falsely,
and it was false. And I remember having rows with the then public health minister and the chief medical officer, because I wanted to give my child the vaccine separately, because the argument was it was together was causing the problem. I was wrong. The poor little mite had to go through three jabs because of what I believed at the time. But I was wrong. It was a parental right, but it was the wrong thing to do. So it is the kind of misinformation people get about vaccines. That's what causes this.
We're just seeing the chart on the screen, and the bottom line, the green line, is the take-up of vaccinations by parents of Black, African or Caribbean origin, whereas white, British and Asian are the other lines. So you can see everybody is falling, but huge falls in the Black community. Gavin, let's go back to this COVID vaccine issue, because from my point of view, the problem with the COVID vaccine was it wasn't tested, it hadn't been trialled, it was an innovative technology. People had every right...
It was trialled.
Well, not for 10 or 20 years, as these vaccines have been. It was a new technology. They weren't the traditional type of vaccines. People were right to be mistrusting, I think, of it, especially when you're giving it to children who didn't need it.
Yeah, but actually the statistical outcomes from the COVID vaccine have been not bad at all.
But people were... You can understand why people wouldn't trust it.
Well, I think governments have to make proportional decisions, and COVID at the time was a disease that had a pretty high death rate. Now, as it turns out, it wasn't as effective at spreading transmission as we thought, but we had good reasons to believe at the time that it did, and also the alternative was keeping the country locked down for God knows how many years. So I think it was a good thing, but clearly not the same levels of efficacy as the standard vaccines. I think I'm much more worried about that. I don't think it's just particular communities, black community, etc. I actually think it's immigration as well. If you look at it on a nationality basis, the countries with the lowest level of child vaccination that are coming into the UK, Afghanistan, Sudan, Eritrea, Somalia, countries where we've had massive spikes in net migration in the last 5 years. And this is the unspoken about phenomenon. Doctors will tell you that this is happening in private, and we're getting vaccine escape due to people coming from, frankly, much poorer countries.
And countries where some of the diseases that we'd almost wiped out in this country are still prevalent.
Whooping cough is back.
Whooping cough, yeah. Babies died last year from whooping cough.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes down to migrants, I mean, I think they've got an awful lot more to worry about, and it may well be they don't want to actually interact with authority, given what they're going through at the moment. So I don't know those figures. I don't know that it was low there, so I'm not sure about that. I do think that that COVID was the problem. I spent COVID talking to more virologists than I did politicians during that period. The basic explanation was that the vaccine was trialled properly. Actually producing a vaccine once you've got it right is not difficult. They're all much the same.
Well, they're not. The old form.
You didn't need 10 years.
The traditional vaccine, which is basically where you inject someone with a dead or diminished virus, that's been going since Edward Jenner in the 18th century when he discovered the cowpox vaccination. Sorry, I used to be a biology teacher, apologies. But the mRNA vaccines were a novel vaccine, and so I personally think there's good reason to want 10 years of trial before you trust it. And I think, unfortunately, as Gavin said, the argument about COVID has become mixed up with the argument about childhood vaccinations, which have saved countless lives and prevented an enormous amount of infant mortality. We just cannot afford to lose trust in those vaccines, but hopefully people will uptake the chickenpox vaccine. I certainly would. Having nursed 3 children through it, it's not pleasant. Anyway, coming up, the World Athletics gender testing rollout receives widespread support from female athletes. So should other sporting codes do the same? That's after the break.
Welcome back to Britain's Newsroom with Andrew and Beth.
Hello everyone, Patrick Christys here.
I'm Michelle Dewbs, Britain's News Channel.
Access the stories that matter to you. Take the GB News family with you on any device. And as long as you have an internet connection. Tune in to GB News anywhere on the planet or beyond. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's News Channel. At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christys tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christys tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world. Am I allowed to talk now? No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I ever got up?
About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m. only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
From the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Welcome back to Dewbs & Co. And let's go back to that breaking news where asylum seekers will be allowed to stay at an Epping migrant hotel until a full trial can be heard. Well, we can cross live to GB News' national reporter, Jack Carson, who is on the scene in Epping. Jack, Epping has, of course, been the scene of numerous protests over recent weeks. What's the mood like today following the appeal court judgment?
Well, there was a sense from a lot of people that they were disgusted, as they told us, they were devastated, and there's a real sense of disappointment in this community at the decision to overturn that temporary injunction on housing asylum seekers at the Bell Hotel here. If it had been upheld, it would have meant that by the 12th of September at the latest, the 138 asylum seekers who are housed here and accommodated here would have had to been moved. And of course we know that coming into October that there is that court hearing as to whether permanently they are allowed to stay here. There is a sense from the people we've spoken to here in the community that there is, in their words, hope that that will still be upheld and that there can be a permanent decision made at that court hearing. But as you can see around us, there are a few members of the Epping community gathering, a few union flags, plenty of beeping of horns from people going by, shows of support here in the area. We know that in handing down that ruling, the reason the Court of Appeal judges say they ruled in favour of Somani Hotels and the Home Office was that the initial ruling on the temporary injunction was seriously flawed in principle. They concluded that the judge had made a number of errors in principle which undermined the decision, including ignoring what they called the obvious consequence that the closure of one site means capacity needs to be identified elsewhere in the system. But just how has that decision gone down? Let's take a listen to a few residents we spoke to earlier on.
Absolutely disgusting, devastated, feel like crying. We come here every week, show our support, and then they've taken it that they've got more rights than us citizens. An absolute disgrace.
There has to be suitable places to put them, not within communities, not scattered about houses. They're unchecked, and that makes them dangerous.
Yeah, strong views from those there. These pink ladies, of course, they've become quite infamous at the protests that have been held here at the hotel here in Epping. Reacting to that ruling, the Home Office Minister Dame Angela Eagle said that the government was committed to closing all asylum hotels by the end of the Parliament, saying that the reason they'd appealed against the High Court ruling in the first place was that the end of hotel use could be done in what they call a controlled and orderly way. But the Epping Forest District Council say they are ruling nothing out at this stage following the Court of Appeal decision, including taking its bid for a temporary injunction to the Supreme Court. One of the things that had been mentioned in that ruling that was handed down earlier today was that such an injunction may incentivise other councils to take the steps similar to what Epping Forest District Council have done. We know that there are multiple councils across the country that were looking very closely at the decision today as to whether they might possibly put in their own application for a temporary injunction. And Reform UK leader Nigel Farage criticised the decision today, saying the government had used the ECHR against the people of Epping and that illegal migrants in the UK have more rights than those who are British. And of course, here at Epping, the protests and the show's support against this decision today continues into this evening.
Jack Carson, thank you very much for that report. And of course, underlying this decision is the fact that it's so difficult to deport people. And on the matter of deportations, Lee Anderson is going to be discussing that issue later on in his show coming up shortly. Nigel, what are your thoughts on reforms, deportation plans that they've announced this week?
Unworkable and all over the place. The whole thing is a complete mess. That it doesn't just involve leaving the ECHR, it involves rewriting a whole host of British laws. We have a problem with Northern Ireland, what would actually happen to the Good Friday Agreement, and Nigel Farage can't even get it right about who he's going to deport. So initially it was going to be everybody, then he decided to leave women and children alone, and we still haven't heard about what about families. I don't take this one seriously.
Well, we'll see what Lee has to say. Thanks, Nigel. Well, it's Friday night, so welcome to the Dewbs Tavern. There we go, the background's changed. Wonderful, we're in the pub, honest. And let's move to our final story, which is that World Athletics have begun a mass rollout of gender testing for female athletes, which is ahead of the upcoming World Championships in Japan next month. Now, under this new scheme, all female athletes are required to take a one-off cheek swab or a dry blood test to detect whether they have any male characteristics. Well, this comes after a number of controversies in recent years where trans athletes who are biologically male have been allowed to compete in female sporting categories. And you may remember this iconic photo of the transgender swimmer Leah Thomas taking gold medal at the US NCAA Championships in 2022. What a size difference there. And the transgender athlete Laurel Hubbard from New Zealand, who famously competed in the female weightlifting category in the 2021 Olympic Games. Gavin, it's absurd that men have been allowed to compete in female competitions. It completely undermines the fairness of sport. Do you think this new testing should be rolled out to all sports?
Broadly, yes. I think it's a great idea. Isn't it interesting? I don't actually know the stats, but it always seems to be biological males wanting to take part in female sports so they can win. It never seems to be biological females wanting to take part in male sports. 74% of the public oppose biological males taking part in women's sports. I'm amazed that it's not even higher than that. And half of Labour voters actually back the Supreme Court's recent decision to define gender as biological sex for the purposes of the Equality Act. So this just strikes me as common sense and important for women.
And you've just seen on the screen the average difference in world records between men and women is at least 10% for all sports and more than that for some. This is just common sense, isn't it?
Well, actually it is, yes. I mean, as you know, I'm perfectly happy for a biological man to be officially known as a woman. That seems quite reasonable. I think the Gender Recognition Act...
It seems mad to me, but anyway...
OK, I know it seems mad to you, but I think that's reasonable. However, I've always supported women-only spaces. That's what the Supreme Court came down and protected. And the same thing applies to women's sport, that is a particular area where biological men should not be able to compete. The FA changed their rules in June on the basis of the Supreme Court judgment. World Boxing has done the same thing. They're introducing testing. So it seems to me it's the right way to go. However, I've never understood quite why trans women are banned from women's events in chess. It seems to be rather insulting to women that somehow they have an advantage by being biological men.
Well, there's always, if it's single sex, there's normally a reason for it. And men's and women's brains even are wired different, not just their physiology. Gavin, do you think we've reached peak woke? I mean, the trans mania has been extraordinary over the last 10 years. I mean, 15 years ago, this just wasn't a thing. The idea that men would be trying to compete in women's sports was unheard of. And yet we've seen this astonishing support from liberal media, from, athletics federations. It's a kind of emperor's new clothes moment, which finally people are seeing.
I'm a bit more worried about this than you are, I think. I think we're reaching peak woke of the current wave, if that makes sense, because broadly speaking, the people who are involved in the media, politics, legal decision-making are still people over the age of 40 who are not brought up with this stuff. It's taken a while for them to realise it's going on, and now there's been a kind of a backlash amongst, people like us, quite frankly, because we think it's all insane. I worry about people who've been educated much more recently, people going through school at the moment, or people who've graduated from university much more recently. If you look at the opinions of people of that age group on all this stuff, it's, from my perspective, actually pretty worrying. So I think there might be a way yet to go.
And if you really dig down into that data, the difference between young men and young men becoming increasingly conservative and traditionalist, young women become increasingly liberal. Are you worried like Gavin is about?
No, I'm not quite sure what Gavin is worried about. I do think that schools and universities have handled the trans issue so much better than the rest of society. And certainly in schools, as far as I can see, that kids growing up today, the ones I talk to and when I've spoken to their teachers, don't care about it so much.
Well, from what I can see, schools and universities have been some of the worst and they've enabled it. But anyway, we like all points of view on this show. So thank you so much, Gavin and Nigel, for joining me tonight. Enjoy your Friday night. Thank you so much for watching. And of course, up next, we've got Lee Anderson's Real World. So please stay tuned, have a great weekend. And we will, of course, be bringing you all the latest on that really big breaking news today about the Epping Hotel.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Boxed Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
Hello, very good evening to you. I'm here from the Met Office with your GB News weather update. Through tonight, it is going to turn mostly dry for many of us, but then tomorrow there's a band of heavy rain with some strong winds mixed in with it, all due to a weather system currently out in the Atlantic, but it is heading our way. Nonetheless, before that, most of today's showers are going to be fizzling out through the next few hours. Still some continuing for some western areas in particular. Many places, though, having a dry and often clear night, and under those clear skies, some rural spots in the countryside, it could turn a bit fresh. Temperatures in a few places could dip into mid, maybe high single figures, but most towns and cities, the more built-up areas, holding up in double digits. A fine start to the day for many of us then tomorrow. Lots of actual sunshine around through the morning across much of England and Wales, away from those western coastal parts where there will be a few showers. It's looking largely dry, lots of blue sky through the morning. But across Northern Ireland, starting to turn cloudier by around 7, 8 o'clock in the morning, and a few patches of cloud and a few showers across parts of Scotland. Towards the east, though, it is looking largely dry. Away from Shetland here, there will be some fairly heavy rain around. Then as we go through the day, that band of rain that I highlighted at the start, that's going to sweep its way in, and so things are going to turn wet and windy as it pushes through. It's going to take a little while to arrive across eastern parts, not really until the evening or even overnight, but when you get that rain, it is going to be quite heavy and, like I said, some very strong winds mixed in with it. Because of the blustery, wet weather coming through, it's going to feel fresher than of late, but warm enough in any sunny breaks ahead of it arriving. On Sunday, and we have more showers coming in across western parts. Further east, it's likely to stay dry with some decent sunshine, but even a few showers are likely to push through later on in the day. And then the showery, often unsettled theme continues as we go into next week. Some more persistent rain is possible at times as well. I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Boxed Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good evening. This is